2023 was such a good year when it came to champion releases. You had the likes of Kate Bishop, you had the likes of very underrated champions like Werewolf by Night, you had just straight up insane ones like Photon, you had a ton of different champions that all brought different things to the table, and I feel like most of them were pretty good additions to the game. Now Adam Warlock is in that category as well, but with Adam Warlock here, he easily has the most mixed reviews out of any champion in 2023. Whenever I try to get some opinions on Adam Warlock, it's always just split 50-50. One side is like, yeah, this guy is with the top champions in the Cosmic class. He is with Galen, Hulkling, and Cosmic Ghost Rider even. But then the other half is like, no, this dude is pretty dang overrated. He's like a mid-tier Cosmic at best. So today I want to do a case study. I want to analyze Adam Warlock and see just how good or how bad this champion truly is, just so I can get my own opinion on this character. So I have three categories here. I have the utility, the damage output, and the usefulness of this character. Now keep in mind, my Adam Warlock is rank 5, level 65, and ascended as a 6-star champion, so I have this guy at the pretty much highest rank. Well, I guess now he's a 7-star, but at the former highest rank, so I know how this champion works. But let's just get started here. So case study number 1, utility. For a Cosmic champion, utility I feel like isn't as important for them because the Cosmic class is the damage class. You have Hulkling, CGR, you have Hercules, who are just damage powerhouses, but even they have some pretty good utility as well. So what does Adam Warlock do? Well, he has access to the stasis pod. This is pretty much his most unique thing by far, and what it does is it minimizes damage output by like 75%. He regens damage taken as well, and he can just bypass pretty much any damage source in the game because he reduces the ability accuracy of damage over time effects by 100%. Now, that is very, very good, but the stasis pod does have one downside. More on that later. Now, he also has access to buffs, and these buffs give him some pretty good utility as well. He has access to true damage, unblockable, massive crit rate, which I feel like is a utility, especially in the current era of 7-star champions and challenger rating. He also has sovereignty as well, which gives him anti-nullify and neutralize, but more on that later because it is kind of a downside to him as well. He also has a taunt, a stun, and an energy protection buff, which gives him immunity to cold snap, incinerate, and shock. So yeah, a pretty massive kit there when it comes to utility, but it's not all perfect because for the bad side of his utility, the stasis pod, while it's really, really good, does not prevent stun effects. And that's important because while you're in the stasis pod, you cannot do anything, and that includes blocking. So if an opponent uses a special attack against you while you're in the stasis pod, which is very likely with the taunt especially, and they inflict a stun on you, you can't block that or avoid that. You will just have to get stunned, and usually those stuns are long enough to where once you're out of the pod, you are still stunned, so you take the full damage from a combo or even a special attack sometimes. So the stasis pod is pretty dangerous at times, and it's not completely safe, but if you utilize it correctly, it still is a very good ability to have. Now, this next one is something that I notice is a trend for 2023 champions, and I cannot stand it at all. So Adam Warlock has the sovereignty buff, and this buff is pretty dang strong, especially on defense, but on attack it is quite gimped because you cannot utilize this buff against quest nodes or battlegrounds nodes because it specifically says for champions. So the nullify for champions and the neutralize for champions, but not the nullify from nodes. And that is pretty annoying because that means Adam Warlock can't take buffet, he can't take buffet over time, power snack, things like that. Now thankfully the sovereignty buff makes his buff's ability accuracy reduction immune from any source including quest node, so that's pretty good at least. But yeah, that one little line can just be so annoying for some champions, and Adam Warlock is unfortunately included in that list. Now, last but not least, the energy protection buff is very, very good, but it lasts only 60 seconds. Now, you can activate it on the SP2 every single time for 2 seconds, which means that he will pretty much purify all energy DOT on him, right? Which is pretty good, but if it stacks up a lot, you might not have the time to just cycle SP2s like that. So I think while this is good, it really isn't the best on attack, especially in those longer fights, like even some Alliance War matchups at this point with the rank 3 health pools. So yeah, Adam Warlock, I wouldn't say he is a proper immunity champion for sure, but that is the utility section of Adam Warlock. Now let's talk about the damage output and rotations of Adam Warlock. It's no surprise that Adam Warlock hits really, really hard once he gets going, right? But how do we get there? Well, his damage form is pretty much all hit damage, either physical from his basic hits or energy from his special attacks. Now, he gains buffs from the sovereignty counter, and all of these affect his damage output. At 10 charges, he gains true damage. At 20 charges, he gets a massive precision. At 30 charges, he gets a pretty massive fury as well. And at 40 charges, he completes the counter and gains a very, very long fury buff. So all these things combined, and once he gets those fury buffs rolling, it leads to some pretty great damage output, right? But where are the problems with this rotation? It seems pretty straightforward. Just build up the charges, get the fury buff, and then just win, right? Well, not really, because with the sovereignty counter, it is 1, very unforgiving, and 2, it is very strict as well, because how it works is if you parry during the counter's like runtime, it just shuts off completely. That's it. You mess up, you cannot get it back for at least a good amount of time. And additionally, the duration of the buffs that are on Adam Warlock are very minuscule. Like, think about iHulk for a second. It's pretty much similar to that, and it's just very, very unforgiving if you just spend the tiniest amount of time just not attacking the opponent. So that's why Adam Warlock's rotation can be very, very bad, especially because the AI reliance is just always there. If the AI just plays really weirdly or just bottles up without you knowing that they're bottling up, then they can just really, really mess you up really, really fast as well. And the single slightest mess up means that your damage output is just gone, and you have to wait a pretty long time to get it back. So that's why Adam Warlock, especially in like the higher end content, just doesn't really feel super safe to play. But I will admit, with proper play, you can honestly just minimize the AI reliance with some certain rotations and some certain tricks to just play around the AI and just control the fight yourself. And it's not like Adam Warlock doesn't have any control himself, right? He has Intimidate, Unblockable, and Taunt, which all three are just incredible at controlling the fight. So it's not completely on the AI, but even the best Adam Warlock player will tell you how unforgiving he is sometimes. But if you do master him, if you do learn him really, really properly, then yeah, he becomes an absolute monster, right? The damage output is insane. His utility is also really good as well. Like, this man just becomes a total stud. But if you don't know what you're doing and you can mess up really, really fast, he becomes the complete opposite. He becomes this champion that just will not function for you, I feel like. But last but not least, we have the usefulness of Adam Warlock. Now, this is the tough part. If you just want to play for fun, do some questing, and just play in a mode where you have infinite tries at something, then I think Adam Warlock is one of the better champions for that, right? Because if you mess up, there's no harm, right? You just restart the quest, put a revive in him, and then you're golden, right? Like, that's it. That's all you have to do. And that's where I feel like Adam Warlock is going to be really, really good. But then we have the other side of the game where you just can't make mistakes, right? And if you do, it is a lot more punishing than questing, for example. And Battlegrounds and Alliance War are those two main pieces of content that just allow pretty much zero mistakes. So where does Adam Warlock work? Well, he's a great quester, like I said, because in that piece of content, there isn't much harm of like messing up. And with Adam Warlock, if you don't master him, you're going to mess up a lot with him, right? And he'll be very unforgiving as well. But with his rotation and his damage output that is really, really good, of course, he does work for like Battlegrounds and even some Alliance War paths on paper. Because on paper, you just think, does he have the damage output? Yes. And the utility, of course. So he should work for this, certain fight, for example. But then when we put it into like real life or like the actual fight itself, things change a bit because you have to actually just realize the rotation of him and the problems that arise with that playstyle. So is he good for Battlegrounds and Alliance War health pools? Yes. Is he good for the actual game modes? I don't know, right? And I can't give a good answer right now because the current metas are just not good for him either. Right now, it's not Adam Warlock's time, I feel like. Maybe one day it will be his time, but as it stands right now, I don't see any use for him in Alliance War and Battlegrounds currently. But even if the nodes were good for him, would he still be used very often in Battlegrounds? Well, here's the thing. He's a good defender, and that always is important to note because defenders have a use in this game. So he's a good defender, so that always gives him at least a purpose to be on your deck. But for attack purposes, it all depends on you, right? I'm not here to tell you like, hey, this champion's good or bad. I'm just here to lay out what I know and like what I think about this champion. If you have a different experience with Adam Warlock, that is good. I'm glad that you have a good experience with him. My experience with him is very 50-50 sometimes. And if you want to take that risk for Adam Warlock, then by all means, put him in your deck, use him on attack, and just make the magic happen, right? But some people want consistency. And with Adam Warlock, if you master him, you will get that. But if you can't master him, he won't be as consistent as other champions. So that's why Adam Warlock is such a 50-50 for me. But I know that in Alliance War, he just will not be good because he doesn't do anything the best, I feel like. His damage output's great, his utility's great as well, but none of it is the best. So I feel like Adam Warlock just doesn't have that much use in Alliance War mainly, but Battlegrounds, I feel like that's where his canvas is. And I want to see how he does in that piece of content. But yeah, I probably talked about this for way too long, which I do apologize for, but I want to air out all my thoughts on this champion because I still just do not know what I think about him, right? But let's go to the closing sequence of this video. So this is it for now. I want to keep on making videos about Adam Warlock because he is ascended and rank 5 on my account. So I feel like I really want to just put a lot of effort into this champion, right? But I wanted to make this video first because he is pretty popular right now. And with that popularity comes a lot of debate about the champion. And I thought it'd be a good idea to just give my thoughts on this character and show that I am pretty open to just, figuring him out and seeing if he actually is really, really good or just not as good as we thought originally, right? But to recap this video, I feel like Adam Warlock has a ton of potential, especially on paper, right? His damage output looks crazy. The utility with like the permanent unblockable and true damage, as well as the stasis pod that just reduces damage output from all sources, is incredible. I think that kit in itself is just really, really good. But sometimes the real problems are when you actually use a champion in very, very important pieces of content. For example, like Battlegrounds or Alliance War, where you realize that a champion isn't as consistent as you thought they would be. And consistency is the main problem for Adam Warlock. And I always say this, but a really good Adam Warlock player will not experience this problem at all. But for like me and for most people that just pulled him as a 7-star champion, we're all just trying to figure out Adam Warlock right now. And that's why this is just the end of this video. It's not the end of Adam Warlock on my channel because I feel like I'm just getting started with exploring the character. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on Adam Warlock for now. And yeah, that's about it for me.